So, what we're going to cover. So, just to reiterate a little bit of what I just said there, we're going to firstly look at what's happening out there. Just give a little bit of background information, some stats and some statistics about the environment right now. Now, this isn't to scare people, it isn't to induce fear or panic. It's just a little bit of awareness, and it's always a good starting point to lead us into the next few bits that we need to talk about. We're then going to go into why charities are targeted and why the sector is targeted and the implications of that. We've then got a section of some real world case studies where we're going to take a look at what's happened to people in the sector, why it happened to them and what happened to them. And then right at the very end, once we've sort of gathered all of that knowledge and information together and we understand what's been going on, we can now start looking at ways in which we can tighten up security and ways in which we can improve things. So, what is happening out there? So, an estimated 28 to 30% of UK charities experienced a cyber breach or cyber attack in the last 12 months. Now, obviously, that is a high figure. What I will say is it's not just your sector. It is affecting everyone everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're an SME, a large organization, a global organization, whether you're in education or whether it's just happening to you personally in your own life, it's always on the rise and it's always increasing. This is the reason we do talks like this, to share a bit of information so that we can work together to hopefully start getting that number down at some point. So an estimated 61,000 UK charities are affected annually by some degree of cyber crime. 1 in 7 suffer actual cyber crime itself. Now, there is a difference between an attack, an actual crime, or a breach. Now, an attack could be that they don't actually get anything from you. It's more of an attempt, if you like. Whereas the crime is actually that something has happened. There could have been a data breach. There could have been services that have gone down. Money has been stolen. And obviously, it's a highly worrying statistic to see that this is affecting 1 in 7 people, or charities, should I say. And of those people that are getting affected, 86% of charities that experience breaches said that phishing was involved. Now, for those of you who don't know what phishing is, it isn't what you do on the side of a lake with some beers and a rod and a hook. It's not that at all. Spelt differently, spelt with a PH, effectively in very short terms, because we will dive into this a little bit more later on. What phishing is it's generally an email that goes out to people where they try and manipulate you and panic you into performing an action, normally downloading a file, normally clicking a link, but it's done through fear and it's done through panic and urgency. And this is the most common way in the sector, and probably generally it is the most common, well, just globally in all sectors, really. So what we're going to do off the back of that is we're just going to start with a very small activity. So what I've done here is I have created a phishing email. So very akin to the types of phishing emails that you might get on a day-to-day basis, whether it be personally, whether it be in business, your organization, wherever it might be. So I've created a dummy one here for us to take a look at. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to take a look at this email. If you're on a phone, by the way, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but if you're on a PC or a laptop or something like that, you'll probably be all right here. So basically, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes yourselves just to have a little read through this email, take a look at it, and I want you to note down to yourself or mentally. You don't need to type it in the chat. You don't need to say it out loud over Teams. Just note it down mentally or on a notepad, all of the areas that you would deem as red flags. So these are the ones that arouse suspicion, that you would look at and go, oh, that doesn't seem about right. So I'll give you a couple of minutes from now, and what we'll do is we'll go through it all and sort of discuss it all in a second. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just give another 30 seconds or so just to finish up and look through the last few bits. Okay then, so if we take a look at this then, so let's take a look at what looks suspicious in this email. I'm going to run through a few bits in here. You might have spotted some of these, you might not have spotted some of these, you might have even spotted a few areas that I haven't even noted down in here. So first of all, the from address. Now, this should always be your first point of concern when looking at an email. Now, this email says IT support team. Now, that in itself looks perfectly legitimate. You could have received an email from the IT support team. However, the domain here says bna.itsecure.co.uk, which is a bit funny. Doesn't look right. Is it an email address that you've received emails from before? Now, this example email is mimicking a BNA email. So our domain, for example, is BNA IT Solutions. So that doesn't match our domain. So who is this BNA? That should be your first red flag as to where this email's come from and that it may be suspicious. Second point to look at, we've got dear user. So we haven't got your name in there, which again would be a bit strange. Who sends an email with dear user or dear so-and-so? You know, your name would be in there, surely. However, there might be scenarios, it might be a group email maybe, where it wouldn't specifically have your name in. But again, another potential red flag there. Next one. So this whole sentence goes a bit before this red box here, but let's just read out the sentence there. It says here that your access will be suspended within the next 2 hours unless immediate action is taken. Now, phishing emails, and again, like I say, we will explain a little bit more later on about these, but phishing emails try to induce panic and fear in order to make you do things that you wouldn't normally do and to make you click things or download things that are going to compromise your system. Okay, so this here is number one where they would go to. It is inducing a time frame of immediate action to try and make you panic and take action. The next line, please verify your account details. No legitimate company, whether it be your bank, whether it be ourselves, for example, are going to ask you to verify your account details via a link that we've just sent you through email. It's a massive red flag. And if you ever have concerns about anything like this, generally your banks say it as well. Call them up, ask them, any company that's asking you to do anything like this, you should always be just calling them up to double check if it's legitimate. But I will tell you now, 99% of the time, it's not going to be legitimate. So if you're ever asked to verify any details via email, red flag instantly. We've now got the link. Obviously, a link in the email taking you to a website domain that you have no idea what it is. Again, it doesn't match bnaitsolutions.com. It's bna-it-secure-yada, yada, yada, yada. On its own, it just doesn't look right. And again, it should just be flagging as a red flag to you of, that's not legitimate. Next issue here, permanent account deactivation and loss of all data. Again, it's tapping into that fear. If I don't do something in the next 2 hours, I might lose all my data. Panic mode sets in and you click a link and before you know it, the business is compromised. Lastly, one that you might not have picked up on. At the very end here, we've got BNA Secure Services. Firstly, it's a bit weird because it doesn't match IT support team that it was in the apparent from field, but also there's no signature. There's no banner, there's no disclaimer. It just ends with BNA Secure Services. So just to show you in just this one simple email here, I think I've got 7 points in here which could be deemed as a red flag. Now, the point of this is not for you to get all 7 of them correct. We're not saying that you need to decipher and email this in depthly. When you get a phishing email come through like this, you generally only need to pick up on 1 or 2 aspects on it before it goes, okay, this is a bit suspicious. And different people will see things differently. So if you've got processes in place, especially around payments, where multiple people will look at emails, collectively as a team, you can generally pick up on these sorts of emails. So we've talked about some of the statistics. we've shown this as an example as to how you might get targeted, but we obviously want to know why the sector is getting targeted and what the implications are for you guys out there. So why are you getting targeted? Why you specifically? Well, the first one is valuable data. You guys hold so much data in comparison to a similar sized SME out there. You have donor records, you have staff details, you have beneficiary information. In some cases, like I've put here, you've got health and safeguarding data. And this is an absolute treasure trove for attackers out there. Now, the reason is because all of this information can be sold. So, for example, names and addresses and dates of birth can be sold on the dark web. Bank details, payment information can be used for fraud. Login credentials can gain them access to accounts or systems, which again, they will then sell. And as well with you guys, if you have, for example, a charity donor database, for example, that can be sold to scammers and in bulk. So what they're looking to do here is to obtain this information from you so they can sell it on. Limited resources, lower cyber maturity. Now, what we mean by this is because the sector generally has more limited time, more limited budget and specialist support. It doesn't affect everyone, and it's not a generalized statement, but it does tend to affect and lean in this way. The lower cyber maturity, well, the cyber maturity is lower. So what we mean by that is you've got more points in which you could be hacked and breached. So, for example, you've got limited funding. So funding may well be prioritized on frontline services rather than things like cybersecurity. So cybersecurity may well be seen as a cost or not necessary in a business, whereas, another organization, maybe another business might take a different view. Maybe there's more budget to play with, therefore they can spend money on these sorts of things. Training can be harder due to large numbers and high turnovers. So we're talking about a large number of people involved in your sector. We're talking about trustees and volunteers and employees and all of this, which means training becomes harder. How do you train all of these massive amount of people to follow procedure and follow protocol? It's a lot harder compared to a comparable business. We've also got staff wearing multiple hats, which I'm sure some of you do every single day. You've got multiple job roles in a sector and you've got a lot of work to do in that sector. So who is really going to be caring about whether their PC is up to date? They're not going to. Therefore, all of these things combined lower that cyber maturity, and hackers know this. People, they know what they can target in each individual sector. What have we also got? I've touched upon this already, actually. So more human error points. So again, I've put it here. You've got staff, volunteers, trustees, suppliers, and the big one in sort of your sector as well is bring your own device. So what bring your own device is people that use their own phones, they use their own laptops, keeps costs down. So use your own personal devices. But these are all potential doors into your system. That are very hard to control. And again, hackers will know this. And lastly, mission pressure, higher risk. Attackers know charities may feel forced to act quickly to resolve or restore services or protect vulnerable people. And again, I draw a comparison to an SME of similar size. If an SME goes down, okay, what's the implication for them? Okay, maybe a bit of lost revenue here or there, a bit of disruption for a day or two. But if your service goes down for 2 days, the effects are greater. We're now talking about people, we're talking about frontline services, and hackers understand this. They understand that they can induce more panic, and therefore you are more susceptible to an attack. So why it matters? So we now know why they're potentially targeting the sector, but why does it matter? Well, some of these are self-explanatory, and I don't need to go into in too much detail, but obviously it protects your funds. Budgets are tight, and the loss of money, no matter how big or small, can have huge implications. You've got service delivery here. If your systems go down and your services slow down or stop, what is the implication of that to you? I just touched upon it there. If you go down for a day or two, who gets affected by that? And what are you going to do to get your systems back up and running? Safeguarding is a huge one, massive one. If your data is exposed, the people affected may be donors, staff, volunteer, or vulnerable beneficiaries. Safeguarding is a massive one, really, in this sector. Safeguarding, yeah, it's very different in your sector to SMEs. There's very little safeguarding data in a generic SME. You can still have data breaches and so on and so forth, but they're not affecting people out there. They're just affecting maybe some staff, bit of payroll here or there, which is not great still, but it's a lower risk. And then trust is massive. If trust is damaged, fundraising and reputation can suffer for a long time after a technical issue is fixed. Again, with you guys, if a breach were to happen within your sector, who's going to know about it? Has it got the potential to make local news, for example? Are a lot of people in your sector going to know about it? How are they going to look upon you for that? Are they going to want to work with you? Are local councils going to want to work with you? And so on and so forth. It can have huge ramifications that go years down the line. So what we're going to do now is I've got some real world case studies. But before we get into the real world case studies, I'm going to do a bit of explaining and a bit of tutoring to you guys about different types of threats that you are likely to encounter in your field. So most attacks start with one of these. They'll start with either phishing, email impersonation, supplier compromise, or human error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here. I'm going to explain what all of these are for you to give you a little bit of knowledge on them. And then I've got some real world scenarios after it that have happened to charities in the sector in UK, and we're going to take a look at the information as to what happened to them, and we're going to work out collectively sort of what attack they were susceptible to, basically. So phishing. So phishing is a type of cyber attack where an attacker sends a message, usually an email, that appears to come from a trusted source. The aim of tricking people into an action. This could be by clicking on a malicious link, downloading an attachment, or entering in login details into a fake website. Unlike impersonation on its own, phishing is specifically designed to manipulate people into giving access or information by creating a sense of fear or urgency. So we already touched upon it. We went through the email earlier on that I'd created, and it was all about creating that fear and urgency to get people to take action. So email impersonation. An email impersonation threat is a type of cyber attack where a malicious actor sends an email that appears to come from a trusted person, such as a colleague, senior leader, or supplier, in order to deceive the recipient. Okay, so the goal is typically to get the recipient to take a specific action, such as transferring money, sharing sensitive information, or granting access. These attacks rely on trust and familiarity, making them particularly dangerous and often harder to spot than a generic phishing attempt. So there's massive overlap between these two types of attack, and sometimes it can be a bit hard to spot which is which. You obviously don't need to determine which is which. You just need to be able to determine that there's an attack there. But the main difference here is what I've touched upon is phishing is through urgency and fear. Email impersonation is through trust and familiarity. It's pretending to be the CEO, the trustee, the supplier, and asking you, you know what, oh, so-and-so, can you just send the money over to this company? I need you to do it urgently. Yeah, no problem. I'll send that money over. Guess what? That's email impersonation. Supplier compromise. Now, this is always a trickier one to defend against, and I'll go into it a little bit more. But what supplier compromise is, it's a supply compromise is a type of attack where a criminal gains access to one of your trusted suppliers and then uses that position to target your organization. This often involves sending legitimate looking emails such as invoices or payments that appear genuine because they come from a known contact. The goal is typically to trick you into making payment, changing bank details, or sharing sensitive information, making these attacks particularly dangerous due to the existing trust in the supplier relationship. So you might look at that and go, well, if my supplier gets compromised, what can I do about that? Well, there are steps in which you can take, and there are I guess, protocols that you can implement. So, for example, when a supply gets compromised and they contact you, generally what they're going to be after is more than likely a payment. They're more than likely going to send an invoice over. So there is a degree of just due diligence and I guess a certain nature of common sense that sort of comes into play here. If you send supplier invoices on a regular basis and then an irregular invoice comes through the door, well, that should be a red flag. And the way in which that you should be handling these is a simple phone call can go a long way these days. And this is what I tend to say to a lot of people. If you're unsure about anything, just take a little bit of time just to give somebody a call and just double check that it is legitimate. You know, it'll only take 2 seconds for you to call, well, a bit more than 2 seconds, but it'll only take you a little time to call up the supplier and go, you've sent me this invoice through. We don't normally get an invoice at this time. Is this correct? They turn around and go, oh no, that's not correct. They can address things on your end. You've remained protected. Everyone's happy. But in addition to that, supplier compromise is kind of one of the main reasons why Cyber Essentials was created in the first place. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard the name Cyber Essentials going around, whether it makes sense or not. But what Cyber Essentials very simply is it's a set of guidelines for organizations to follow to show that they are taking cybersecurity seriously. So if you work with a supplier that has their Cyber Essentials accreditation, you know they've got the baselines in place, which means they're less likely to get compromised, which means you're less likely to get compromised. If you've got your Cyber Essentials in place, you can let everybody know that you work with that you're taking it seriously and you're not a threat. It is a guideline for businesses to work and protect each other. That's effectively what it is. It's proof and trust, and just showing everyone around you that we're protected, and we want people that we work with to be protected. So collectively, we're all defending each other. Now, human error. I won't go into this one too much because it's a bit self-explanatory. But setting something up incorrectly, poor access control. What I mean by that is, people giving permissions to people when they shouldn't be for whether it be documents or maybe somebody's got too many permissions for their financial system. Also just simple mistakes that expose data. Somebody shared a link with somebody that they shouldn't have. And the thing is, you can have all the defenses in the world, but if human error comes into play, there is nothing that you can do about that. So what we're going to do is, off the back of that, we've got those 4 categories now. We're going to go into some real world scenarios. So here we have a case study for mermaids, UK-wide charity, and a breach was discovered in 2019. So what happened? So an email group was created with insecure settings and remained viewable online for almost 3 years. There was no dramatic cyber attack. This was a configuration and governance failure. Okay. So off the back of that, I want you just to take 5 seconds and just have a little think about what I've spoken about and work out in your own heads. Again, you don't need to put it in chat. You don't need to say it out loud. Just think of it in your own head, what that relates to, what likely caused that issue. Okay, so in this instance, the likely cause of the issue would have been human error. So just as we talked about, an email group was created by somebody in the organization with insecure settings, which remained viewable online for almost 3 years. The impact of this was around 780 pages of confidential emails and information on roughly 550 people were exposed, and the charity was subsequently fined £25,000 by the ICO. The lesson that can be learned from this is you can have good governance, reviews, access settings, and staff training matter just as much as the technical security tools. Okay, you can have all the procedures in place, but if you leave your front door open, somebody's going to walk in. Okay, and that's on you then. Next one. So the RSPCA, Dogs Trust, Battersea, Shelter, Friends of Earth, UK-wide organisations. This happened back in 2023. So what happened? a cyber attack on About Loyalty and a subcontract Kokoro. I have no idea how you pronounce that, by the way, but we're going to go with that pronunciation. Affecting multiple well-known charities. Supporter data such as names, email addresses, partial addresses, and donation history were exposed. So, what was likely the cause of this one? Have a little think. Okay, so in this instance, it was supply compromise. So just as we discussed again, and what's interesting about this is a supplier of the supplier in this instance, which really goes to show how far and how deep this can go. For example, the RSPCA could have had their cyber essentials in place. They could have had all their basics covered. And About Loyalty could have in certain aspect, but Kokoro obviously didn't. They obviously missed something. If somebody gained access to Kokoro and they were able to send legitimate impersonation emails out to all of these businesses, then again, it's just completely circumnavigated any defense that might be in place. You're now bringing this straight down to human error at this point. What lesson can we learn from this? Well, you are only as secure as the people and platforms you rely on. Supplier due diligence and data mismanagement matter. So when we say supplier due diligence, it is what I spoke about a second ago. Are the people you're working with taking their cybersecurity effectively? Are the people that you're working with subcontracting to people that you have no idea who they are, and they could be an absolute joke when it comes to their cyber security? It's all these things that just need to be taken into account, really. The impact of this one, by the way, Friends of the Earth said around 93,000 supporters were affected. The wider number across charities likely ran into the many hundreds of thousands of supporters. So in this instance, the attackers have got hold of potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of data. And they would have been taking that straight to the dark web, selling that off to any old buyer and cashing in for a hell of a lot of money on their side. And that data is now out there, basically. Next one, Red Kite Community Housing in January 2020. So what happened in this one? So attackers mimicked a legitimate supplier and inserted themselves into a genuine email chain. Payment details were altered through email deception rather than a dramatic external hack. So what, in your own heads, do you think this one falls into? Okay, so this one, now I've left two up here. So the reason I've left two here is because earlier on I said there's a bit of overlap between some of these and they can be interpreted in different ways, and that the main point is to just detect the threat in general. Now, some of you might put supplier in there. If you put supplier in there, I can see why you did it. However, in this instance, the supplier hasn't actually been taken over. They're just being mimicked. So the supplier hasn't been breached in any way, shape or form. So what it is it is a little bit of both, and I've gone with both of these in here. So if you said either of these, well done, because we just don't know the extent of the email. We don't know if it was done via a threatening manner or if it was done via a trust manner. We just know that an email that was pretending to be the supplier was sent. So either or could be correct in this instance. The impact of this one. Red Kite Community Housing lost upwards of £1 million, was lost through fraud. The charity described the experience as being conned and had to tighten security controls afterwards. They actually posted about this on their website, got quite a big extensive article on it, really. And again, it's just a shame because it says, and they say that if they'd put a few procedures in place, it probably would have stopped this from happening. And it's just really sad and unfortunate to see that it's taken this amount of money lost to take action. And unfortunately, it happens with so many people. They don't take action until it's too late. What lessons can be learned from this? Email-based payment verification and finance controls can be the difference between near miss and catastrophic loss. So again, what I mean by that is, I think I might have mentioned it again a little bit earlier on in the presentation, was that if you've got multiple people who are trained to look for phishing emails and spam emails and spot patterns that don't quite make sense, if you've got multiple people that this goes through and they all look at it, you've got multiple lines of defense at that point. You've got multiple people that can potentially pick up on these issues. Like I say, sometimes these are just going to get through. You know, cybersecurity, you can't stop everything. It's just impossible to stop everything. So you need to have that degree of training in place and degree of protocol in place that whenever anything financial related goes through, it goes through multiple layers of people assessing it. Now, obviously, that is potentially easier said than done. Obviously, I don't know how your individual organizations operate, but if there's just any way that you can just add extra layers in anywhere, it can be the big difference between what's happened here and what might not have happened to them at the end of the day. So last one, we've got the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. So what happened here? So a ransomware incident disrupted operations and created significant recovery costs. Now, what I will say is with this case study is it's not actually been pinned down and proven to what exactly the case was. So in this one, we're just going to have to sort of theorize potentially off the information we do have what the cause was most likely to do with. So in this instance, the likely cause of attack was an email sent to individuals with the purpose of gaining access to systems. Okay, so based off of that, what does that sound like it is to you? And of course, phishing. So there's no impersonation involved in this whatsoever from what we know of from the information we have. To me, that sounds exactly like a phishing attack. The incident in this case, it was a ransomware attack. Now, what I'll do, I'll just explain what ransomware is because there might be a few people who are just looking at this going, what the hell is ransomware, Ben? So it was really prominent a number of years ago, and a lot of cybersecurity is now sort of, I want to say, gotten more on top of it now to the point where you don't really hear the word too often. However, if you're not protected, you're obviously still susceptible to it. But what ransomware is, it will generally come from a phishing email, somebody clicking a link, somebody downloading a file, the attacker gains access to maybe your PC or your environment, and what they do is ransomware is encrypting your files. So they will encrypt all your data, encrypt all your files, so you can't get into them. And then what they do is they send you a nice ransom note demanding money to release the files, hence the name ransomware. In this instance, again, there's a good report on this about how it unfolded really. They mentioned that they obviously didn't pay the ransom costs. The ransom that they was given was about £20,000. Obviously, they didn't pay that. You know, if you paid that anyway, you don't even know if you're going to get your data back to start with. They could just keep holding you to ransom. So they basically had to spend about £65,000 recovering their data, recovering their systems, and getting back to where they could have or where they should have been. And the real lesson here is that this wasn't a sophisticated hack. This is just a simple phishing email and missing basic protection. I think the Edinburgh Festival, if I remember rightly on their page, they said that they didn't have a couple of the basic procedures in place, which they now do. But again, it's taken this to get them to act. And I think it's a real key takeaway point is that a lot of these attacks, they're not sophisticated. You know, these aren't groups of people sitting in offices, you know, or in their bedrooms hacking away doing these sophisticated breaches on your system. They're just simple emails with a simple link in. And I liken it to, you know, the kind of criminals that go around the streets checking car doors. You know, eventually one of those car doors is going to open and they're going to be in. It's literally the same kind of procedure as that. It's just scattergunning phishing emails out, and at some point somebody's going to fall for it and they're going to get in. It's not complex, it's simple, but we need procedures in place, just like locking your car door, to prevent them getting in. So Out of those 4, how many did you get? So obviously, if you got all 4 of them, fantastic. If you didn't get as many as you thought you would, or you would have liked to have got, then it doesn't matter. That's why we're here today. We're here to learn. We're here to build upon knowledge at the end of the day. Next time you do something similar to this, maybe you score a bit higher. And I think it's a real takeaway is that, you don't need to be an expert, but attending sessions like this and cluing up on your knowledge is a fantastic starting point to start putting the procedures in place that we can all do to protect ourselves and to protect each other. So we have been through the what's happening out there. We've been through why the sector is being targeted. We've been through how the sector is being targeted. So the big question is really, what can we do about it? Okay, what changes can we make? What can we put in place to start protecting ourselves? So there's 6 points here. And for me, these are the 6, what I would say, basic foundational procedures that should be put in place for anyone, and these can be done on a budget as well. And that's the brilliant thing about these. Getting your cyber in place or your cyber protection in place doesn't have to cost money. You just need to know where to start, basically. And that's kind of what this is all about. And what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to talk you through every single one of these. So I do apologize. You're going to have to listen to me waffle on about all 6 of these now. I promise it will be as painless as possible, but hopefully you will learn what each one of these are and why it is relevant. And then off the back of that, we can all start protecting ourselves a bit more. So first and foremost, MFA. So some of you may have heard of this before. Some of you may have never heard of this before. It does sometimes go by different names. However, MFA now seems to be the standard name it goes by. Sometimes you'll just see it as authentication. Sometimes you'll see it as 2FA. But multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is what it says. It's multiple layers of authentication. So when you log into your email system, for example, you put in an email address, you put in a password, you hit the login button, and you get into your email. Lovely. However, what MFA is just adding an extra step in there. Now, generally what it is you'll put in your username, you put in your password, you'll hit login, and then you'll be asked for a 6-digit code that's on your phone, for example. You'll punch in that 6-digit code, and then you're in your email. Now, normally this one gets a lot of pushback. Normally gets a lot of groans from people because people don't want to take the extra time to do a bit more security or have to get their phone out to look at their 6-digit code. The thing is with this is this is probably the most important thing that you can do when it comes to cybersecurity. And it's not just your organization, it's personal lives as well. I mean, if I was to do a show of hands in this room, for example, I won't do it. But if there was a show of hands in this room for who has got MFA set up on their personal emails, I wouldn't be surprised if that only came out at 50% or less. A lot of people don't even have it set up on their personal emails. And what I say to people is that MFA, if your password gets out there and somebody gets into your, let's just talk about personal email for now, let alone organizational email, but your personal email, what can they do with that power? I mean, all of a sudden, they've now got the power to reset your Amazon password. They've got the power to maybe reset your PayPal or maybe reset your social medias or your Spotify. They have access to everything that they need to. Not only that, but they can just scour your emails for any kind of sensitive information, anything that might be able to, that could be fraudulent that they can get hold of. It's a very scary proposition to not have an extra layer of protection on your systems. And what I would say is, if there's just one thing that everybody can take away from this session today, it's MFA. It really is. It's just get your MFA enabled and just rest easy. I mean, why does it matter for charities? I mean, most modern attacks involve somebody obtaining a password through phishing or reuse. Now, what I mean by reuse, by the way, is somebody obtains your password, a hacker obtains your password. What they're going to do, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to try that password and your email address on every single system out there. They're going to go on Amazon, see if it logs in. No, they're going to go on Spotify, social media, whatever it might be. They're going to reuse that password combination to see what else they can get into. MFA puts a step in the way, so it doesn't matter if you lose your password. Obviously, we don't want to be losing our passwords, but if it were to happen and you were to lose your password, then you've got that protection in place. They still can't get in. Okay. Now, how can a small charity implement this? Well, if you're using something like Microsoft 365 or you're using something like Google Workspace or any kind of financial systems, I mean, I don't know if you're using something like QuickBooks or just any of these cloud-based systems, they will have the option in there to enable MFA. Okay, now, like I say, this isn't a technical deep dive today, so I'm not going to go into how exactly you find it in every single system. What I would say is if you want to enable it for any of these, just punch it on Google. Just go, how do I enable MFA for my Google Workspace? It will give you the instructions on how to do it. If you want further assistance, this is where obviously like we come in. Just send me an email. I'll be more than happy to help you and guide you and point you in the right direction. Now, one thing I will say is when setting up authentication, multi-factor authentication, try and use an authenticator app rather than text messaging, which is SMS where possible. The reason for this is SMS messages are sent in plain text, making them relatively easy for attackers to access, or giving attackers can gain access to telecom networks and intercept these. It's not as secure. Now, you could go through your whole life using SMS authenticator codes and never have an issue. But if you've gone to all the effort of setting up your MFA, why use the option that is least secure? Get an authenticator app installed. You'll have Microsoft Authenticator, or I think it's Google Authenticator, one of those two, and get it set up through an app. And you just know you've done it in the most secure way then, basically. And in regards to this, so make it mandatory. Just set a company policy that it is mandatory to have your MFA set up, and just do some checks. Just make sure people have got their MFA set up. It doesn't cost anything. Yeah, it will cost a little bit of time, which is understandable, but just to enforce this as a policy, send it out to everyone and just double check with people that they've set their MFA up. Yeah, there's a little bit of work initially, but once it's all set up, done. You're protected. It hasn't cost you a penny. Right, next one, staff awareness and safe reporting culture. Now, we have touched upon aspects today where staff training and human error has come into effect. So what does this help prevent? It helps prevent phishing clicks. You know, it enables staff to be able to spot red flags in emails. It helps prevent fake payment requests by giving staff the knowledge and tools to be able to spot and action things in an appropriate way. Stops them from downloading malicious links or anything like that. I mean, why does this matter? I mean, your team is both a risk and a defensive layer. At the end of the day, they could hinder you, or they could be a unit that protects the business at the end of the day. And most attacks rely on trust or urgency working against people. Okay. What I've also got here is a charity with a no blame reporting culture can catch mistakes early and dramatically reduce impact. Now, the important thing here is that mistakes are going to happen. They do happen. Cyber threats are going to get through. Even if you've got the best defense in the world, something's going to get through. Somebody's going to be tired one day and maybe make a mistake or rushed or panicked, and something's going to happen. The most important thing that can occur in that scenario is to have a no blame culture. I've worked in IT a long time, and I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to in my life where they've been hit by a cyber threat. I've called them up and said, okay, explain to me what happened. Oh, no, nothing happened. I just opened an email and all of this has gone wrong. They're too embarrassed to admit that they've done something. And all this does is waste time in fixing the issue. Okay, so people need to know that if a scenario like this happens, they can freely express that they mucked up. That's not a problem. You know, it's about fixing the issue afterwards. It's not about blame. Okay, and if everyone has that mentality and everybody has that ethos, like I say, things can be addressed, and the issue can potentially be resolved before any major breaches or potentially before any payments are made or anything like that. So it's very important. But how can a small charity implement this? Well, I say small charity here. I mean, it's any charity really. Run short quarterly awareness sessions. 15-20 minutes is enough. They're simple and relevant. And that email that I showed you earlier on in the session, that wasn't a big email. I'm sorry, that didn't take a lot of work to create. I created that on Copilot in about 2 seconds. You don't need a fancy system in place that automatically sends out emails and reports back of who's done what here and there. It's just about getting the basics in place, just sitting down and having a session like that, just to build awareness. It's a little bit of practice at the end of the day. Password managers, the other grown passwords. I mean, how many times have we been told in our lifetime that we need to have different passwords for different things? However, it's completely unviable because we can't remember 20 different passwords. So what does everyone do? Everyone uses the same password or just uses variations on passwords. Or some people put it in a spreadsheet or a sticky note, which is great. So what can we do? There are password managers out there. Now, this is going to be a cost. Now, whatever you do, please do not use a free password manager. I don't need to tell you what the potential is in that. If we have password managers are just pieces of software that basically hold and encrypt your passwords. Generally, they have add-ins that link into Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome, so that when you go to websites, you go to a website to log in, it will pull your password from the password manager. So it's nice and easy for you. What this allows us to do is it allows us to have different unique passwords for different software without the ag, without having to remember it, without having to put it in spreadsheets or without sticky notes. So again, just look into some password managers. It will make your life a lot easier. It will make you a lot more secure in the long run. What else have we got here? Backups. So interesting one, this. So backups don't prevent cyber threats per se. However, this does link back to one of the case studies we were dealing with where they were hit by a ransomware attack and it cost them £65,000 to get back up and running. In the event that your operations are targeted, in the event that maybe your data is encrypted, what you want to be able to do is know that you have a reliable backup to go, okay, right, this has happened, it's bad. However, we've got all of our data in an area over there so we can recover it or we can access it. All of a sudden, operations are minimized. These costs are minimized. It prevents permanent data loss. It prevents long periods of downtime. All of a sudden, instead of maybe being down for a week, you might be down for half a day whilst you just recover it and get things back up and running. Again, there is going to naturally be a cost involved in this, but there are plenty of systems out there that will do backups for your cloud services. And one very important thing worth noting here actually is if you have your data in, let's say, Google Workspace, or you have it in Microsoft 365 and you use something like SharePoint, that's not actually backed up. Just because it's in a cloud system, it's not backed up. There are systems that will take this information and they will back it up. Hackers will look to get on your Microsoft 365 environment and they can still do whatever the hell they like with it, rather whether it be steal it, whatever it might be. They can do what they want with it. It's not protected if it's in the cloud. Just get a backup in place, okay? Updates and patch management. I mean, how many of us have had that little icon in our system tray telling us we've got an update and we need to restart, and we've prolonged it for 2 weeks or more in some cases? It happens. At the end of the day, we're busy people and we don't want to have to restart our machine for 5-10 minutes because it's lost productivity in the day. However, what attackers do, they often use weaknesses that already have a fix. So when Microsoft announced that they've patched so-and-so and so-and-so, it's almost like a bit of hey, attackers, there's an issue here. We've patched it. However, it's entirely down to you as an organization to ensure that you have applied that patch or that update. Now, again, this can be done for free, whether it be by adopting a protocol where every single Friday, for example, everybody just does this at the end of the day, updates or restarts their machine just to get the updates going. Whether it be that one person goes round once a month, maybe checks the Windows updates on a machine, make sure that they're updating. You know, it can be done for free. It's just a little bit of a policy change, but can make a huge difference. You close off those back doors. Like I say, it's like locking the back gate instead of letting somebody walk through into your garden. You know, you've locked it, you've stopped it, and it's taken no extra funds, just a tiny bit of time, basically. And lastly, access control and user lifecycle. So, what do I mean by this? Well, what I mean by this is when you have somebody join your organization, don't necessarily give them access to everything. Okay, limit and try and put processes in place where you only give them access to what they need. If you have a financial system, maybe some people only need access to certain areas of it rather than the whole thing. If you have a cloud-based document sharing environment, maybe start putting some permissions on and splitting folders up. So, you know, here's your trustees folder, here's your volunteers folder, instead of giving people access to absolutely everything. But I think what's most important in this sector or in this section alone is leavers. If you have somebody leave your organization, whatever you do, just remove their account, remove their permissions. And you might already be doing this, which is great. And you can start doing this through just simple joiner and leaver processes. You know, when somebody joins, what do they need access to? Okay, we can do that. When they leave, what do they need to be taken off of? Just a list of all the systems they need to be taken off of, just so you have a reminder and you don't miss anything. Because at the end of the day, an account sitting there that has permissions to your system that they no longer work there is a threat. That password's not being updated. That account's not being monitored. It is a potential way for people to get into your systems. So after I've rambled on for long enough, what are the takeaways from this? At the end of the day, you are a target. And it's not to scare you, it's to make you aware. You are a target. Charities of all sizes are dealing with cyber risks now. Okay. But most attacks are preventable or reducible. The basics stop many of the patterns that we have discussed. Those 4 patterns we went over, you can mitigate the majority of those just by implementing these 6 simple procedures. Okay. And lastly there, start simple and start now. Okay. You don't need to go away from this and implement everything I've discussed. I really hope you do implement a few of them, because it means we've done a good job and made a difference today. But just start small. Start implementing a couple of them a bit at a time with a long-term goal to get to a position in X amount of time where you've got all of these covered. Because at the end of the day, cybersecurity is not about being unhackable. It's about becoming harder to attack, faster to recover, and safer for the people who rely on you.